we're going to get started. Just hope you're all ready. Everyone who's sitting here, it's going to be very interesting, I know. So you have to be warned that you can't get up because this event's being filmed live on YouTube. There's thousands of people watching, and if you get up, you're going to ruin the show for everyone. So if you want to go to the bathroom, I'd go now. All right, are we all good? So make sure. Hi everyone. I'm Sam from eToro. I don't know if you know what eToro is, but soon you'll hear a little bit about that. This is a blockchain meetup with eToro and Stellar. For many of us who work in fintech in Israel and are part of the blockchain community, this is a very exciting week. Not only is it FinTech Week here in Tel Aviv, but also we've got a very important visitor here in Israel. They announced on the news, I think it was this week in Israel, that Prince William would be coming to Israel. And everyone was very excited about that, but I can assure you that the visit of the founder of Stellar and the former founder of Ripple was a lot more exciting for many of us here as well. So I'm really pleased to welcome Jed McCaleb, who's here in Israel. So just to give you a little quick overview of what's going to happen, we're going to have a little quick Johnny, who's been managing FinTech Week Tel Aviv, is going to briefly say a few words. Then afterwards, Jed is going to speak for 15 minutes. He's going to present his vision of the blockchain space and Stellar to all of you. Then we're going to have 15 minutes with Yoni Assia, the CEO and founder of eToro, the world's leading social investment network. And then afterwards, there'll be a Q&A a discussion and conversation between Yoni and Jed, which will be fascinating. And then afterwards, we'll have a Q&A from you, the audience, and also from people who are viewing online around the world. So just want to quickly introduce Johnny. I want to say thank you to him for helping to promote this event and for hosting a great week, and also for Rise Tel Aviv as well for providing the space for this event.
I won't keep you long we have royalty here. Just wanted to say hi and thank you. For those of you who don't know, this week is FinTech Week Tel Aviv. We started today. We had our first day was Blockchain Day. And as we say in England, it was a day Mashu Benzana. But if somebody can translate, that would be good for you guys. Tomorrow we're on general fintech disruption. We've got a lot on SME lending and raising finance and insurtech. And Wednesday is cybersecurity. Those of you who aren't coming and or haven't bought tickets, dear Balak, as we say in England. We are, if you want to come for the next 2 days, come and see me, see what I can do. We've had an amazing response, 800 people signing up for the 3 days. So I'm very pleased with that. We are going to be an annual event every year, because obviously annual means every year, at the beginning of March. So please look out next year and take part. So without further ado, I'd like to pass you over to, who am I passing you over to? Who am I passing you over to? To Sam. Thanks, guys, and have a good night.
Thanks very much, Johnny. So now I want to introduce you to the founder of eDonkey, the founder of Mt. Gox, the founder of OpenCoin, which became Ripple Labs, which is now Ripple, and the founder of Stellar, one of the top 10 cryptocurrencies by market cap, Jed McCaleb.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I'm going to give, I don't know how familiar you guys are with Stellar, so I'm just going to give like a quick overview of like how we came to make the platform the way it is. So Stellar, the goal of Stellar was to create this open internet-like protocol for payments. And so let me just talk a little bit about how payments work today. So if you're in the same room, it's easy to send someone money. You just hand them, you know, a $10 bill, and then you've done that thing. It's instant and it's free. Even if we're at the same financial institution, it's still pretty quick. My account gets debited, your account gets credited. Everything's pretty seamless. Things start to get a little more complicated when we have different financial institutions. You know, maybe my bank doesn't have a formal relationship with your bank, so that means the money has to be routed through some like corresponding institution in the middle. So that introduces like expense and delays. And things get even more complicated when I'm holding one currency and you want to receive another, right? Then there has to be some conversion in the middle. And then there's like currency volatility you have to take into account. You know, maybe there's some problem at one of these banks in the middle, and then your money gets stuck. You don't know what's kind of happening, right? It's kind of a big mess. So payments today, they haven't kept up with the way the internet works. There's all these different financial institutions and payment networks. You know, there's ACH in the US, there's SEPA in Europe, there's M-Pesa in Kenya, all these different things, and they don't interoperate, right? And so that leads to lots of expenses, lots of delays, and lots of friction. So is there a way to fix this? Like maybe money is just this inherently complicated thing. You know, there's lots of currencies in the world. You know, there's lots of different ways, things people want to do. Like maybe it's always going to be expensive and slow. But before we give up, let's like look at other things in the internet, for instance, email. So in the early days of computing, if I wanted to send you a message and we were on the same computer, it was pretty straightforward. I would just leave the message there on the mainframe, and when you logged in, you would get the message. And we were in the same local area network. It was still pretty straightforward. I would leave it. Or I would just send it over the, you know, whatever the LAN that we were connected to, and you would get the message. Things started to get more complicated when we had different networks that maybe were using different protocols between each other. You would actually have to specify the route that your message would take through the networks. And if there was ever a problem, you wouldn't know if your message was delivered or not, right? So it was just this giant mess. And this all changed in 1982 when someone came up with the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, or SMTP. And what it did was provide this open standard for sending messages around the internet, and it became what we now know as email, right? And now you don't even think about it. You can send a message to anybody in the world. It's instant. It's free. They get it immediately. It doesn't matter, you know, if they're at a corporation, you're at a university. All these things just kind of interoperate, right? And it's led to huge benefits for our society, you know, both economically and just, you know, and it spread just super rapidly. And it's all because SMTP provided this open protocol for communications, right? So now anyone can send a message to anyone. So why can't we use the same thing for payments? You know, this is 1982. This is a very long time ago, but yet we're still not in this world for payment systems. And it turns out sending money is a little more complicated than sending an email, right? So if I send you an email, it doesn't really matter if I send the exact same email to somebody else. But if I send you $10, I better not be able to send the same $10 to somebody else, right? And that's what's known as the double spend problem. And that's basically issue number one here. Like, how do you store, prove possession, and transmit value in this digital way, right? So that's one of the issues. The other issue is you want to digitally represent like all the existing currencies and assets, right? You don't want just one new token. You know, people want to use dollars or euros or shekels, whatever they're used to, right? And then, of course, once you have these different currencies, it shouldn't matter if I'm using one and you're using another. We should still be able to interoperate. Like, it's a global world. We all want to work together, right? And then, of course, you need to make sure your system still scales, right? This is, you know, payments are used by literally everybody on the planet, so it needs to scale quite well. So is it even possible to solve these problems? And in fact, until fairly recently, we didn't think it was possible to solve the double spend problem in a decentralized way. Like, computer scientists had worked on it. They just didn't think it was actually possible. And this all changed when one of these visionary Satoshis gave us Bitcoin, right? So with the invention of Bitcoin was like super revolutionary, really. Like, it's a really awesome innovation. And basically what it does is it converts a real-world resource, i.e. electricity, into a digital asset, right? And what it does is it basically creates this, you can think of this like giant rock that's out there in the world that people can chisel on, but no one can change arbitrarily, right? And so what this does is now when I want to send you $10, I chisel it on the rock that, hey, I've sent you $10, and now I can't send it to anyone else because they can just look at this giant digital rock and see that I've already sent the money, right? And so this solves the first problem. This solves the double spend problem. So that's great. But we still have these three existing issues that we want to solve if we want to make this open interoperable system for payments, right? So Stellar solves the 3 remaining problems. That's what we kind of set out to do. And let me walk you through quickly how we do that. So the second problem is how do you represent existing currencies and assets, right? So again, you want dollars, euros, whatever in the system. And what this means is that if there's a digital dollar in the network, there has to be a real physical dollar somewhere out there in the world. Otherwise, the thing is unbacked, right? And luckily, we have institutions that do that already, and they're called banks, right? So they have these huge vaults of money. And so Stellar has this concept of anchors. And all anchors do is they take some form of value in the existing world and tokenize it and put it onto the Stellar network, right? So for instance, a USD anchor, you give it $100, it puts a $100 token into the network. You can now send this $100 token like Bitcoin or any of these other cryptocurrencies around to anybody else, and they can eventually bring it back to the anchor, and it will give you the real dollars, right? And you can have these anchors for all kinds of assets. So this is how you digitally represent other kinds of other currencies, right? And so now that you have all these assets in the network, you want to make sure that they're still interoperable, right? So I have dollars, you have shekels, we still want to trade, like we still want to have commerce. And the way that we do this in Stellar is we have an order book inside the network. So not only you can send from A to B, but you can also put up an order to buy or sell these different assets that are in the network. So for here, you see somebody has put up an order to buy Naira and sell lumens. And then someone else has put up an order to buy lumens and sell yuan, right? And so now somebody in Nigeria can send money to somebody in China because it goes through these distributed order books that's inside the network. And great. So now kind of the last problem is you want to make sure your system still scales. And one of the main ways we did this was by using what we call the Stellar Consensus Protocol. So if you're familiar with Bitcoin, it has this, in all of these blockchain networks, the very important piece is the consensus mechanism, right? And that's basically how the world knows what's on that big rock. It's how everybody agrees what's on the big rock. And Bitcoin uses this thing called proof of work. Probably all of you are familiar with it, but essentially it's an extremely expensive process. And what Stellar Consensus Protocol does is it's just message passing between the participants. And the nitty-gritty details are kind of beyond this talk, but we have a long white paper that you can look at. It was created by Professor David Mazaris of Stanford. So basically some of the advantages are that it's way more efficient because you don't have to have these racks of machines that are validating the network. So it allows you to do way more transactions per second for a much lower cost. And it has this kind of ideal of flexible trust. So you don't necessarily, everybody in the network doesn't have to agree on the same people that it's trusting. Whereas in Bitcoin, you're basically trusting the largest miners. In Stellar, you kind of get to pick who the nodes are that you're trusting. And this maps closer to the real world, particularly when you're dealing with fiat currencies. So it's one of the keys of Stellar. And so again, what we were trying to do with Stellar is make this payment system where it didn't matter if I was at a bank or some mobile money operator or some startup, an MFI, what have you, or if I was using one currency and you're using another, all of these systems should be interoperable. And so that's what Stellar is. It's an open protocol for payments. And so sort of the implications of this are, we won't see for a while. But they should be potentially very interesting. And it's cool because the creators of the internet didn't anticipate things like Wikipedia or Airbnb, but once you give people this kind of open platform for innovation that's permissionless and anyone can build on and has these standard protocols, people do all sorts of cool things. And so we're very much looking forward to what people build on Stellar because we're just the platform. We depend on people like eToro and some of the other projects that are in the Stellar ecosystem to take it and make it actually usable by people. And so this is Stellar. If you want to learn more, you can jump in our Slack channel, slack.stellar.org, and talk to us. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Jed. Yoni, he spoke for 10 minutes, so you've got a competition. See if you can keep it around that time. Hey, this is Yoni Assia, the CEO and founder of the world's social leading investment network. And here he is.
Where's my presentation? Here?
If you haven't deleted it.
Okay, so first of all, big thanks and applause to the Stellar team and to Jed. Real real honor having here someone who's built two of the top 10 leading cryptocurrencies that so many people trade on eToro today. So thank you for helping me pay the salaries of my employees. And I wanted to talk really about why is this so exciting. And this is so exciting because all of you are here in the room and because something really, really big is happening. So first of all, I'm Yoni. I'm the CEO and founder of eToro. And I already forked 4 times, so I'm married plus 1. I said forked, so I saw some surprised faces. I have 4 kids, that's it. That's what I said. And I've been dealing with technology and money and finance my entire life. And that is because I think money is the single most important and the biggest invention in human history. And I think what we're witnessing right now is the reinvention of money in digital form. And this means this time that we're all living in and everybody contributing, we're writing a big piece of human history that's going to significantly change how we interact with one another. And money was invented really a while ago, 100,000 years ago, when people basically started lending to each other. Those were the first general ledgers, so that's the stake coin that was used. And then that transformed into collectibles, which really created commerce initially 25,000 years ago. And the reason that's so important because that change in technology to be able to use collectibles created commerce inside villages, and it enabled the beginning of sort of capital. And when that shifted into gold, that basically started the inter-village system. So people could actually transfer gold between the villages and later on between the oceans to build the entire economy. And the reason this is so important and also nice to have Stellar here is because what we're probably building now is the ecosystem and economy of what eventually will become interstellar. And gold transitioned into fiat currencies. Gold actually helped build eventually what we know as governments and countries and enabled all of the countries to work with each other. And today most of us obviously understand that fiat money isn't based on gold anymore. It was depegged from the gold 40 years ago. But still, it's the basis of our entire economy. And when we initially at eToro looked at Bitcoin, and this was really the beginning, 2010-ish, 11, we started looking at Bitcoin and its technology. We were fascinated by it just the same way that originally when I looked at the internet in '94, I was amazed by it when I downloaded Simpson episodes texts back then. And those are the qualities of sound money. And what's really amazing is you have an amazing group of smart people now who are suddenly quoting Marx and Smith and Keynes and all of the big economists in the world to describe basically how money started. And when Bitcoin started and we started looking at it, we realized this is a paradigm shift and how basically money is defined and how the underlying technology money can significantly change. And since in 2010, 2011, if you wanted to do a meetup group, and we actually did a couple of meetup groups, it was like 5, 6 people in a room, much geekier than most people here, and nobody really listened to us. Older people ridiculed the concept of blockchain and new money, and that's really something that really took off this year. So when Bitcoin originally went up from 10 cents to $2.50, nobody was really excited. But when last year it went from $1,000 to $20,000, basically the world started to move towards the future. And when we started dealing with Bitcoin, we originally visioned a world where all financial assets, so at eToro, we offer people to trade stocks, commodities, currencies, and of course cryptocurrencies today. But when we connect to all of the financial services industry, we understood that something doesn't work, that the entire clearing, settlement, and connectivity between financial institutions is broken, and we wanted to use Bitcoin and the Bitcoin protocol to eventually solve that. So we've built colored coins to enable us to tokenize financial assets on top of the Bitcoin protocol, which again is why we're so excited to have Stellar here, which actually executed that vision and created an open network for people to tokenize financial assets. And when we started working on colored coins, and a great example of what's happening in the perfect storm we're in, a very young guy called Vitalik Buterin approached us and asked us whether he could work together with us on the colored coins protocol, and eventually came to the conclusion that it's not good enough to build it on top of Bitcoin. It actually took us much longer to admit that maybe Bitcoin isn't good to tokenize other financial assets, and that you actually need maybe another type of blockchain to tokenize financial assets and to enable a payment network. Colored coins eventually became Kolu, which just recently finalized their ICO, and of course Vitalik Buterin, that worked with us on colored coins, eventually built Etherium, which was the real sort of accelerator of what we've seen last year with the entire ICO space. And suddenly the blockchain space isn't only about Bitcoin, but it's also about thousands of new tokens. It's also about new blockchains that are worth billions of dollars. And it's about an entire economy that's now worth $500 billion. And this is really a new age. This is bigger than the internet. This is bigger potentially bigger than the invention of computers. This is a new type of communication and a new type of global communication. This is the Internet of Value. And at eToro, we're super excited because that connects directly to our original vision of opening the global markets for everyone to trade and invest in a simple and transparent way. And we've built for the last 10 years what is today the largest social trading network in the world, where we have over 9 million users who can trade the global assets as well as cryptocurrencies. We've been innovating like crazy in the company for the last 10 years. And today we have about 9 million users and about 450 employees worldwide across China, Russia, UK, Australia, Israel, of course, Europe, the US, and we do about 1 million trades across all assets every day. And we're super excited to have Stellar here in Israel, connecting to the local crypto currency community, the local crypto community, with so many talented people here. We're happy to add Stellar into the platform and hopefully see it surge as we've seen Ethereum surge when we added it at $8 and Ripple at I think 10 cents. So this is just hopeful thinking for you mostly, Jed. This is not investment advice, of course. And we're happy to be a part of this very exciting community. This is the building blocks of a new economic global future, and we're also launching today a couple of more copy funds into our platform that are based on machine learning. So while we're looking at blockchain as a key pillar to really tokenize the entire financial services industry and change it, we're also looking at machine learning to eventually make most of our investment decisions for us. And of course, the combination of these two amazing technologies of machine learning and blockchain, we believe will completely change the world. So it's a great pleasure hosting here the guys from Stellar, and let's toast and grill you here, Jed. Thank you very much. Well, we're doing now the one-on-one, right? So who's starting the grilling? So tell us a bit about when you started OpenCoin and Ripple. When was that? What sort of brought you to start Ripple and OpenCoin and how it's related to eDonkey?
It's not directly related to eDonkey, other than my interest in like distributed systems in general. But yeah, so when I first learned about Bitcoin, I got super excited about it. I didn't really think it was possible to solve that problem before I learned about it. So, and to me, like immediately, it seemed obvious that this was a super cool innovation, and if people would adopt it, then it would mean lots of good things for the world. One of the things that always bothered me about it was the mining aspect, because it seems really wasteful. I think there's like literally $1 billion spent on mining last year, so it seems kind of a shame for the number of transactions it can do. So, so I just started thinking about other ways you could solve the consensus problem, and came up with the idea that kind of underpins Ripple. And so I think in probably 2012 is when I kind of started working on the project. I found some other developers I had moved to San Francisco. I found some other developers in kind of the Bitcoin scene, David Schwartz and Arthur Brito, to kind of help me make it real. And we worked on it, and then eventually hired Chris and some other people. Yeah, but that's basically where it came from. It's just kind of the understanding that Bitcoin's this awesome idea, but trying to kind of approach it in a different way. I think over time we kind of realized we could take it much further than just having a token that you could send around. So
tell us a bit about sort of the fork. So at some point in time, sort of you forked or you progressed from Ripple into Stellar. A bit, why was that, and how is the vision of Ripple and Stellar different, and of course, why is Stellar better than Ripple?
Okay. Yeah, so I left Ripple, I think in 2013. Basically, the person I brought on to be CEO, we kind of had a falling out, and it just wasn't working out. So I left, and I let them keep running the project. I didn't think they were taking it in quite the right direction. So about a year later, I was going to do something else completely different, but I just thought that the opportunity was still super big, and I wanted to see it executed in a particular way. So I basically started what became Stellar, and some of the things that we wanted to improve are just the way the coins are distributed. I mean, one of the original vision for Ripple is that we would distribute the coins very widely, because I think for any of these things to be adopted, you need a huge network, right? It's all network effects and payments. So you want to do the kind of this massive airdrop to as many people as possible, right? And they weren't really doing that. And then kind of more fundamental, it was set up as a for-profit company, which I think was a mistake. And so it made it where the incentives were a little bit wrong. And if you just imagine the internet created by a for-profit company, it would just not have worked. It would just be a very different world, right? You want the thing to be as open and neutral as possible. So we set up Stellar Development Foundation as a nonprofit to do that. And then along the way, we ended up realizing that the Ripple code base actually wasn't really tenable. So we rewrote everything. And so technically there's lots of improvements. It's safer, it has a better consensus algorithm, it's more scalable. It's just much easier to use. I mean, software is very iterative, so you learn a lot from each iteration. So if you rewrite something, you could do it much better. So as a developer, it's just like way easier to develop with. So those are kind of the main things, like the governance, and technically it's just better.
So you want to give out Stellar to as many people as possible from a non-profit foundation.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
why is that? Yeah. So tell us about how you want to give people Stellar coins.
So we have a few different ways. One is like the build challenge, which if you're a developer, you can go and build a project, and every 3 months or so we award like the top ones. And then there's the partnership program. If you're doing a more significant project on it, then you can participate in the partnership program and get a larger amount of lumens. The biggest one is kind of this, essentially an airdrop to individuals, where we intend to give about $10 worth of lumens to everyone. That's basically paused right now. We're waiting till the ecosystem's a little bit better. There needs to be better wallets and better things that you can do with it before it makes sense for everyday people. But ultimately, we want to get it in the hands of like tens, hundreds of millions of people, which I think will be possible once we have the right ecosystem in place.
And right now, I mean, if you look just 3-4 months ago, I think Stellar market cap was $650 million. Now suddenly it's $6.5 billion, which means instead of giving out $400 million, you need to give out $4 billion, right?
Right.
how does that change, like in your 34 people in Stellar? How does the fact that suddenly, you sort of hit oil in the ground, suddenly you're sitting on $4 billion of assets, how does that change a company? Does it change a company?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are not very cash constrained anymore, and so we're able to do a lot more. We've been hiring like crazy over the last months or two. We'll confidentially, well, not that confidentially because I'm broadcasting this, but we will probably be announcing something pretty interesting soon. But there's just a lot more you can do once the network exists. And I think one thing, just having been in cryptocurrency for a long time, it's just unclear how long this will last. This is obviously very volatile. All these assets are very volatile, so we want to make sure. Because I do think that there will eventually be a correction. I feel like we're kind of like in this .com bubble kind of situation, and a lot of these things are vapor and will eventually go away. We just want to make sure that we're real enough by the time that the correction comes that we'll ride through, like the same way like Amazon or Google rode through the .com crash. I mean, there's a lot of legitimate ideas here, but I feel like there has to be some sort of like coming back to reality phase at some point. So,
and I know that Stellar just recently started doing ICOs in Stellar. There are a lot of critics in the industry. Most of them just hold lots of Bitcoin, and we call him here in Israel maximalists, who think all ICOs are scam. But then Ethereum and the sort of ICO wave really sort of pushed the envelope on crypto. And now we're seeing suddenly ICOs on top of Stellar. So what are your thoughts? Which type of entrepreneurs are you inviting to do ICOs on Stellar, and sort of the opportunities to do that on Stellar versus Ethereum?
Yeah. So it's an open system, so anyone can do it. I think, not every ICO is a fit for Stellar. I think we have a different model than Ethereum, so we're very... I would say we're really good. What we're good at, we're much better than Ethereum would be at, but we're not good at everything that Ethereum is, right? So Ethereum is much of a more general platform where you could do all kinds of stuff, obviously. Whereas if you want to just simply transfer value or store a security where you're just transferring assets, then Stellar is just a much better fit. It's just more efficient. It's faster. It's cheaper. There's a built-in exchange. For all these reasons, it's just a better fit for these simpler ICOs. So if you're doing something like I don't know, like Kin, for example, then it's way better on Stellar, whereas if you're doing Augur or something like that, then you kind of need the full capabilities of Ethereum. So, it's not like, I don't think one blockchain is eventually going to win the whole thing. I think there's just lots of niches and things will be good for different things, basically. So.
Right, and one of the reasons Stellar is faster, right? It's block every 5 seconds compared to Ethereum with 17 and Bitcoin with 8 and 500 transactions per second, so potentially more scalable for payments.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely more scalable. And yeah, what we're working on in 2018 is trying to improve that even further, because there's a lot of projects with potentially massive scale that are coming onto Stellar that we need to be ready for. So.
And let's talk about decentralization. So Bitcoin is the optimal decentralized, like nobody controls it, right? Then you have Ethereum, which got a lot of feedback that it's a bit more centralized, and you have Vitalik who can make decisions to change stuff, but the architecture is still relatively decentralized with the nodes. And then you have, on the other hand, Ripple, which a lot of the crypto community sort of criticized for being completely centralized for-profit run company. Where is Stellar in that decentralized versus centralized discussion?
So, I mean, our goal is definitely to be, decentralized as possible. Our model is definitely different than proof of work. So, I still maintain that it's fully decentralized. I mean, it's a little bit different in the sense that you actually, someone who operates a validator, you have to be a little more vigilant than you do if you're running like a Bitcoin node. You have to basically set your validator list. But it's up to you who your validators are, and everyone can choose different ones. You don't have to choose us. You can choose other people. So it's still decentralized. If we went away, the network would keep going. I think that's the real test. Is there one party or like a small group of parties that would go away, the network would go down. And in our case, it's no. So I think that's what really matters.
And why do you think so? I mean, when we started colored coins in 2012, I looked at the blockchain technology and I said, this has to be translated into sort of replacing the banking system with euros and dollars and pounds and gold on top of the blockchain. This seems to take much, much longer than sort of we originally expected.
I don't know. It seems faster to me, but I thought this was going to take a lot
I think
longer.
this is relatively fast.
Yeah, I think it's fast. I mean, remember back in like 2011, I mean, no one really knew that this would take off, and we thought that there'd be huge resistance from like banks and governments, and that just hasn't been the case. It's been like pretty embraced. Like I don't know, it's still mind-blowing to me that there's this many people into it and this much money into it, and it's just...
And so little arrests.
Very little arrests. Yeah, very few arrests. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to move to crowd questions for a second, but just before we do, is there anything you'd like, it's the future of blockchain that we're discussing, is there anything you want to emphasize or mention about the future of Stellar and eToro?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, what are your plans with Stellar and eToro? Yeah.
So we're negotiating right now. So I'll give you, so we're very excited about our discussions with Stellar here, and we'll be working together to learn more about how can we tokenize financial assets and sort of our original vision of tokenizing financial assets on eToro on top of the Stellar network, and super excited to meet the team and to start working together. And now questions from the audience.
Cool, so we'll use this microphone. You guys just raise your hands, we'll go around and pass it around. So, okay, cool. First question, and
Hi. So first of all, on a personal note, I'd like to thank Jed for eDonkey that expanded my musical horizons in the days of my youth. That's just me. Yeah, so could you talk a little more about your cooperation with IBM? Your recent cooperation, and also in the aspect of how would you avoid centralization when you're harnessing such a powerful company that it's no secret that is trying to get into the 5 top companies of the world and might be seeing Stellar as an opportunity to do that?
You mean how do we avoid centralization by partnering with IBM?
Yeah, in the partnership with IBM, how do you not let IBM take control of some of the market?
Right. Yeah. So first off, so our partnership with IBM, it's actually a really good fit for us because we don't focus that much on large financial institutions because it's really painful to deal with them. They take a really long time, and if you're a small company, they can end up wasting all your time, right? So whereas IBM has relationships with all the major banks, and so it's easy for them to like go in and sell to them, right? So I think it'll be a long time before major banks do anything on any blockchain, anything real. But it's good to start those conversations, and IBM's kind of doing that on our behalf, which is great. So, and in terms of like, I mean, it's obviously something that we have to be mindful of. We don't want it to become an IBM project, obviously, and so far they don't really want that either because. I mean, IBM, what they've seen, like, for instance, they embrace Linux. They've kind of embraced these open source technologies, even though they are a huge entity. Because I think that what we've seen is this is the only way you get worldwide adoption. You can't, like PayPal will never be used by everyone because it's this central company, for instance, right? Whereas you can imagine like this open payment standard could be used by everybody in the same way that all the internet standards are used by everyone. And they know that, right? So for them, they don't need to own the network. They just want to provide services to these banks. It doesn't actually help them to own the network, right? So, yeah.
Hi. Since Stellar has good qualities in terms of being a coin and its speed and stuff like that, how is it in terms of smart contracts and using it for ICOs or for decentralized peer-to-peer stores of goods? Could be digital goods like photos, songs, blah, blah, blah. How is it better than Ethereum, or what qualities does it have which are superior to other coins in that spectrum?
Sure. Yeah. So it basically has a very different model than Ethereum. We don't have a Turing complete scripting language. We just have kind of simple primitives. So if you, like for instance, making an asset on Stellar is a simple primitive. There's no coding involved. It's just fundamental to the network. And what this does is it makes it where if you want to do these things that are built into Stellar, they're much faster and much more efficient. But you can't do everything, right? So basically what we tried to do is pick a certain simple set of things that allows you to be pretty expressive and gets you basically like 90% of the things that you'd want to do, you would still be able to do on Stellar. So, it depends on what you actually want to do with your application. But if it's most of the ICOs we talk to, it's able to like massage them into the way Stellar works, which is more keeping the logic of the system outside the network, so all the nodes don't have to run it, and having like constraints either with the accounts or the transactions, like time bounds or signatures or things like that, and it kind of works that way.
So, Jeremy Samuel from Metallicoin. I'm very interested in the model and the way that you tie tokens to physical assets. So you've mostly talked about fiat currencies in your presentation. I'm curious how you're associating tokens with physical assets.
Yeah, it's basically the same process, right? There still is some entity that is like holding the physical asset. Maybe they have like gold on deposit or they have like real estate. And you're trusting that entity to actually have the gold or have the real estate, so basically you either give them the gold or buy the gold from them, and they give you the gold token that you can now send around. So it's essentially the same. It's just a bigger thing than a dollar bill. So, yeah.
So one of the problems with scaling the Ethereum network is that it simply doesn't scale at the moment. It's too expensive. Applications aren't going to work. And a lot of people in that space are looking at questions of interoperability. What plans does Stellar have for interoperability? And as a kind of follow-up to the last gentleman's question, is it going to be possible to oracleize data sources, perhaps to introduce physical assets to the Stellar blockchain? Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, the main thing we're doing with interoperability also goes to scalability. We're working on an implementation of the Lightning networks now, so that'll help with scalability within Stellar and also interoperability between chains that have the same Lightning protocol between them, right? So I think that will be pretty interesting when there's lots of cryptocurrencies that have this. It'll make a much more flexible world, and I think it'll address a lot of the scalability issues. Just not only with Stellar but with like Ethereum and all these things, because it might turn out that decentralized systems just don't scale very well. I mean, that is true. So you eventually will have to have some like sharding, and maybe Lightning is the way to get there. So, and then as far as like oracles, it depends on exactly what you want to do. You could certainly have oracles in the network, but again, it's not as it's not as flexible as Ethereum. But yeah.
Rostislav Futalo. I have a question about wallets. You mentioned that you're expecting or you're looking forward to improvement of this part of the ecosystem. What would be your main expectations from the improved wallets, the better wallets?
So, I mean, I think that there's, at least I haven't used, maybe they're out there, but even in the cryptocurrency world in general, there's not very many good wallets, right? So the user experience isn't like Venmo or one of these like easy to use like mobile apps. So we want that. We want something where the user doesn't even really realize they're using crypto because they probably don't care, and they just want money to go from A to B, and it just has to be simple, a simple like app. So it's just a normal like web thing. So it's just a lot of user experience things that need to go into it, right? And so far the teams have been pretty dev focused, which is natural because this is very early technology. So I think what we're seeing now is that there's more experienced consumer-facing teams getting into the cryptocurrency ecosystem in general. So hopefully we'll see something soon. So.
Hi, you've been in the ecosystem for quite some time, and I wonder how you see the evolution of it. Can you explain why you think Ethereum has such a great success, although Ethereum among the same time, and what do you think you're going to do to match the kind of developers' success and prestige?
Yeah. So I mean, like I was mentioning, I think the whole overall evolution has been a constant source of surprises for me. Like I never expected it to take off so fast and have so much interest. It's always amazing when I go back and look at where it was, 5 years ago. So yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons why Ethereum took off so quickly is just because they have extreme interest from developers, and it makes sense. The idea of being able to make some code that gets executed out there on the blockchain and no one's running it is pretty alluring, right? So as a developer, that's an awesome concept, and so obviously you'd want to write things for that. I mean, I think, but as we're seeing, that has a trade-off, right? It has like huge scalability issues because not only is it a decentralized system, but now all these basically every script in the network has to be run on one computer, essentially, right? So that's inherently unscalable. So, so I think for us, I'm excited because we're going to start having like real world use. There's a lot of remittance companies joining the network over the next like 6 months or so, and once money is actually flowing, like a significant amount of money, and it's being used by companies, I think that will drive a lot of interest. So.
Hi. I run an exchange between the United States and Israel to allow Americans living in Israel to move dollars to shekel. So how can I use the Stellar network to allow, say, Canadians living in Israel to move Canadian dollars to shekel, even though we're not licensed in Canada?
Yeah, so I don't know about the the regulatory story, but
turn off the live stream.
Yeah. So definitely check to see if this is legal. But basically, if you take in Canadian dollars, you can issue a Canadian dollar token onto the network, and then basically send that Canadian dollar token to basically somebody else that wants to basically put up an order to buy and sell these CAD tokens for shekel tokens. Essentially, that's all you do, right?
So I'm relying on another exchange to participate in my exchange using the Stellar network?
Yeah, so you need to be able to take the Canadian dollars, or you need some partner there that can like take the deposits.
And as far as profiting, that worked out off the network, or is that also part of the Stellar network? As far as cost per transaction above the Stellar network cost.
Right, like if you want to charge a fee, yeah, you would have to. You could if you control the wallet of the person, then you can charge a fee there, or otherwise you can charge on deposit withdrawal. You can charge the spread between the currencies. I think those are the kind of the ways that you would make the money. So, yeah.
Just a quick question online. This is from our audience that are watching online. Dexter has asked, can you launch duplicate assets on the Stellar network by different parties, and will there be multiple US dollars pegged assets also on the network?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, in Stellar, assets are just currency code and issuer, right? So USD, Chase Bank, USD, Wells Fargo are two totally different things, and the network doesn't see any correlation between them. So you can still have an order book between them, so you can trade between them, and those two would probably be basically one-to-one. But if you had Chase Bank USD and like Mt. Gox USD, they would probably trade at some like discount, right? So that's basically the answer. There'll be multiple of all these assets, and they can trade against each other. So.
Hi. I was wondering if I could get your opinion as someone who founded several coins about the community and the way it behaves. It seems like, and when I tried to do my research, it seems like it's more of a religion than a coordinated effort to actually contribute data and information to the world. A lot of FUD, a lot of if you say something bad about someone or something, the entire community jumps on you. We've seen that with IOTA a couple of days ago. You probably have a lot of experience with that. I was just wanted to get your point of view on that.
Yeah, it's super interesting how once you own any of these cryptocurrencies, you become like a very strong advocate of it. And I think a lot of it is subconscious. I mean, I think people talk their book. It's that they've done for all time. And yeah, so it's a little unfortunate because it makes it hard to have like an honest dialogue on what. If there's problems, like, for instance, IOTA did have some legitimate problems, but it's very hard to have an intelligent discussion about that because there's like super fans that will jump down your throat, right? So, yeah.
So what do you think about IOTA?
Well, again, like I haven't actually looked that closely at it. From what I've, from like the cursory things, the fact that they wrote their own hash function is pretty big red flag. The fact that they said they did it on purpose, they had this exploit on purpose is like super big red flag, but I don't know. Like I haven't looked too closely into it, so yeah.
We met before. As a question, like you started early 2010, mid-ish 2010,
Yeah,
right?
summer 2010.
Right. So back then, your vision probably about blockchain was a little bit different than what it became now. So the first question was like, what is different today? And hopefully for the pioneers that sitting here in this room that are going to develop the next generation blockchain-related products, if you have any advice for what's going to come or like anything that can help us or the people in this room?
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, all of these technologies, what kind of gets you excited about it is the potential, and you're not exactly sure what will come out of it, but you know that there'll be interesting things, right? You're like, here's this interesting technology. I see this immediate use, but I also see that it's a platform, and there's lots of different ways it can be used, and I'm sure it was what the people that were making the internet, they were like, this is going to be awesome. I don't know why, but it's going to be awesome, right? And that was my feeling, and still is, right? I think we haven't really seen like the most cool things that'll come out of this, the coolest innovations. I mean, we see some like low-hanging fruit, like payments and putting securities on it. Like those are like obvious benefits, but I think, you know, in 20 years when we look back, there'll be like something that we didn't anticipate that's even cooler, right? So, yeah.
Hello. Question about Stellar as an infrastructure for DEX. Can you elaborate a little bit? What is the advantage, if at all?
Yeah. So basically, Stellar was built to do cross-border payments. So we have a built-in exchange inside the network. So it's built to trade various assets that are issued in Stellar, right? So what this means is that it's inherently pretty efficient because it's a primitive part of the protocol. So it's basically gives you this order matching engine, and I don't think well, there's a few other projects that do this, but not very many, right? So I mean that's basically the advantage, is just the efficiency. So.
Any other blockchain have a built-in order book?
I mean Ripple does. I think BitShares does. I don't know if NXT does or not. I'm just not familiar enough with it. But there's a couple. But yeah.
This is the last audience. Last one.
Hey, so you've outlined 4 problems that used to be unsolvable, and the first one was solved with Bitcoin, and the other 3 were solved with your platform. What's the next unsolvable problem that's going to be solved with blockchain?
Oh, well, those 4 problems were specific to making this universal payment network, right? So I think those are the 4 fundamental problems for that. I mean, I think the scalability one is not quite solved yet. We're working on it, but as far as like, you know, there's just so much innovation in this space. There's just like papers all the time and like people working on all kinds of stuff. So I don't know what the next problem will be, but I'm sure that it's basically like unleash this whole like area of research that is going to be pretty fruitful, I think. So, yeah.
We'll take just the last question from our audience that's online. Zanderman33 has asked, you have a vast background creating different projects. How long do you see yourself staying with Stellar?
I won't be done anytime soon. There's still a long way to go. So yeah, I mean, I think it's still super interesting to me. We're getting a lot of momentum now. I think the prospect of making this like open protocol for the internet will be compelling for a very long time. So yeah, we've got a long way to go. So.
Great, and the final question, a couple of people asked this online as well, and if you both want to finish on this tone, what's the most exciting project you both have coming up or launching?
I can't talk about our most exciting project, but yeah, but it's coming. It's coming. Something exciting is coming.
He's talking about his partnership with eToro. Cool. Thank you very much, everyone.
By the way, you're more than welcome to stay. There's lots of CEOs and founders of lots of blockchain startups and entrepreneurs here in the room. If you don't know everyone, it's a good chance to meet everyone, and a good chance to meet Yoni and Jed, and also the engineering team here from Stellar are also here.